Hi, this is Matt Nelson, and this is the Module 5 topic. The question is we listened to a recording about special education for minorities in urban settings. And the question is, what are some factors that contribute to the difference in these experiences, and how can educators actively work to counter this phenomenon? So, in the video, we listened to an interview and talking about how minorities, especially Latino and African American students, are overrepresented in special education. And African American students in particular are placed in SPED for emotional disturbances or mental retardation, and this carries a stigma with them throughout their schooling. And it's definitely a problem, and I've seen it in my school I work at in CPS, where if a student is constantly misbehaving or is labeled like a problem student, they are more than likely placed in special education as a way to kind of get them out of there. And oh, they must need SPED because they're this, this, and this. And this is primarily an issue in urban schools, whereas in suburban schools, it's special education is treated more as, rather than it's talked about in the video, a place, and it's more of where the students get services, and they're not as segregated as they are in urban schools. Students in suburban schools are more than likely than not white, and they're more integrated into the school system. They get better services. And it was also noted in the video that the parents fight for them much more because the parents are much more knowledgeable on what SPED offers, and like getting tutors and all these other assistance programs where their student can succeed and eventually leave special education. Where in urban settings, parents are less involved, or they're working and they don't have time, or they don't speak English, and they just are not familiar with the process of special education. When an educator comes and said your child needs to be in special education, they kind of accept it and say okay, and they don't really know the ins and outs or that entails or what it offers, and that student more than likely will be in special education for the majority of his or her educational career. And one thing I've noticed, I'm doing a clinical right now in my class in 520, and I'm in a suburban school in Arlington Heights. And the resources they have, and the staff, and the facilities are very, very night and day compared to what urban schools or the school I work at in CPS offer. And you could see how these students in suburban settings are offered much more in terms of resources and support than schools in an urban setting or Chicago would, because it's, like I said, it's night and day in terms of the resources that are given to them, and the support and the help and parents involvement and school involvement. And if this were translated into an urban setting, I think students would be far more likely to eventually get the support they need and leave special education and not just stay in there. The question is, how can educators actively work on to counter this phenomenon? And one thing I think is that identifying the problem early on. They talked about in the video how if a student is discovered he cannot read or is having reading difficulties in the first grade, he should get the support right there and not wait until third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, where all of a sudden now it's a huge issue. And now it's like, okay, this kid is so far behind the eight ball, we have no choice to put him in special education. There are tutors and tutoring programs and other services outside of the school a student can go to improve his reading skills. And he just doesn't need to be placed and ushered into special education just because of an issue that could be remedied with a multitude of supports. And also just having, I talked about this in one of my earlier modules, with parents and teachers coming together and have an active communication on what is offered and what can be done for the student, and not just place in special ed and then go on that track for the rest of their career, and the stigma that it carries, and it's not good for the student, and it doesn't really help them evolve into a proper student. It's just kind of a place that they are sent and then forgot about in urban settings. So those are just a few examples, and hopefully over time it does get better, and the suburban model, if you will translate into the more urban setting in schools, and students can ultimately get in special ed and then get the help they need and then be integrated back into regular classrooms.